Hi, everyone. I'm Morénike Giwa, Onaiwu. Disclaimer before we start, I have a dental injury. I'm very self-conscious about it, which is why I put on all the makeup and stuff. And I've recently been diagnosed with alopecia, so I'm experimenting with all kinds of new hair things. And so this one kind of feels Elvira-ish or whatever. And so, but I had to kind of get it out of my way so I can pay attention. But thank you for being here. I am going to share my screen if it will let me into you all. So I am Morénike Giwa, Onaiwu, pronouns she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. Really glad to be with you all. And the presentation that I had promised Debbie that I was going to give is entitled Neither Created Nor Destroyed, which is actually a presentation that I really, really love. But this evening I decided I was just really pondering about a few things, and and although I hope to be able to join you all again and maybe give this presentation, I have opted instead to give a different one. And so the one I'm giving is going to be called I, the Beholder. And it's Our Obsessions Equal Opportunities. And I'm going to explain in a moment why I've made this change and why I think it's relevant to what we're doing tonight. But again, I just really appreciate you all being here. I know some of you are here live, and some of you are going to watch this later via recording. However you watch it, just thank you for your time and for your interest and for just being a part of our community. Whoa, that was a little too fast. Okay, so first I just want to kind of get the small, I guess, fine print stuff out of the way for you all that, and for me, the main things that I want to share regarding accessibility and also related to access and disability justice and honoring our limits. And so as a disabled person and someone who, has a lot of responsibilities, I find accessibility to be something that's very important, but I also know that I have time limitations. And so my presentations are very heavily image-based. They're not like a whole bunch of things for you to read per se. And so I would love to provide image descriptions for you all if you need them. So at the end of the presentation, I will give information about how to reach out to my part-time assistant. And if you need the image descriptions, we'll absolutely get them to you so that you can have them if that might be something that would be helpful for you in terms of access. I also want to share that I've been told by a lot of people that I talk really fast. To me, I don't talk fast, but others feel differently. So I'm going to try to be cognizant of that, and I'm going to try to slow down, especially so that the captioners and the people doing ASL will be able to, capture what I'm sharing. But I do apologize in advance if something I say is a little illegible because of the speed. And so I like to start off my presentations when I'm doing presentations with what I call my 5 C's of accessibility. And so when we used to meet in person back in the day, then I would talk about, for example, where to find the, gender neutral restrooms, or where the signage might be, or, if there was a sensory or a quiet room, where that would be located, things of that nature. Now that we're doing most things virtually, which, for many of us is a lot more accessible, we still need accessibility, but it just might look a little bit different. And so I'm going to just kind of share my 5 C's quickly with you all, because I typically do that when I'm presenting. So the first C is for comfort. I want you to be comfortable. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm in my bedroom. I'm literally on my bed. This is my headboard. There's a picture of my hubby and I pre-pandemic weight, looking really cute up there. We can't fit any of those clothes anymore. I've got a stimming device with me, one of my favorites. This is for my friend Leah Kelly, who lives in Canada. And I'm wearing a shirt that I love. It talks about my favorite combo, unmute, start video. So, I'm comfy, I'm barefoot. And I've got some water over here in case my throat gets dry. I also want you to be comfortable because you will connect better with the material if you are. So please, be comfortable, be yourself. If you have questions, put them in the chat or wherever you need to place them. Just do what you need to do. Just feel like this is your space. And then the next C is for connect. I want you to be connected. So not only be comfortable, but be connected, be an active learner. Don't just, be passive. So if something isn't clear, please ask. If you need to look up terms or take notes or anything of that nature, please do so, because that's what we're here for. We're here together to cultivate learning together, and so I don't want this to just be something that you just attend and you're just like, bleh. I want you to get something out of it. I also want you to be considerate of others, who are here. So everyone here is different. Everyone has, a different background, different levels of understanding, different triggers, different, concerns. None of us are the same at all. And so we all are on this journey of life together, and everybody doesn't have the same exact understanding, the same exact know-how, and know all the same words. Let's try to, assume the best of one another as opposed to the worst. And let's try to, give people some grace. I also want, the next one is for challenge. I want you to challenge yourself. So everyone here, whether you know a great deal about, autism and disability justice and all of these different concepts, this might be something that's really, really familiar to you. And if that's the case, I want to challenge you to still look within and find something beneficial and worthwhile that you can use maybe to reinforce what you know. And if there are new concepts that you're learning today, or a new way of viewing a concept that you're familiar with, I ask that instead of just rejecting it outright, that you just give it some time and some thought and some consideration, and to see if it might be something that, if not applicable for you, maybe can be helpful for those in others in your life. And then finally, I want you to commit yourselves to being the best doggone you that you can be. Whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, whether you're, employed, in some capacity, an entrepreneur, an ally, whatever it is that you do, I can't do what you do. I can't be where you are. I can't connect to the people that are in your sphere of influence, but you can. And so if it's about, inclusive language, if it's about, helping people to see things a different way, or encouraging people to, that leadership can appear many different ways, whatever it is, use your voice, use your platform. You don't have to be, some people are like, oh, the big public speaking is not my thing. Good, because it doesn't need to be everybody's thing. How boring would that be? Maybe you're really good with the interpersonal, the one-on-one. Maybe you're good, in small groups or in your workplace or your community. Do what you do, but please continue to do it well, because we really need you. And so we're in a virtual world, and so one of the reasons I'm in my bedroom, aside from the fact that it's really comfy here, is because my kids, it's the weekend and they are watching very loud TV outside. They're comfy. So you might have a fur baby or an actual baby, in your lap. Maybe you are the baby, but just again, be comfortable in your own space. This is the virtual world that we live in now. And so this presentation is called Eye of the Beholder: Our Obsessions Equal Opportunities. The original presentation I was going to give, again, is called Neither Created Nor Destroyed. And that's a presentation that I love because it involves one of my passions. I know some people don't like the term special interest, so I'll sometimes say like intense interest or, what have you, but I'm really, really into Steven Universe. I'm really into The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica, and like Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super. And so the presentation that I was going to give, all of the examples that come from Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and, different characters and the powers that they have. And it's a great presentation, but I really wanted to talk about this one because when people think about autism, when they communicate about autism, it's hard to get around, and I'm very happy to see, if you have not visited the Autism Society website lately, not just this one, obviously please visit this one, the one for your local area, but the national one as well. The Autism Society as a whole has done a huge rebranding. And so instead of the autism-society.org, if you just go to autismsociety.org, you'll see that so many things have changed in the way that, in connection with the community, with things that self-advocates and parents and educators wanted to see, kind of to talk more about the lifespan and to kind of talk about autism in a way, strength-based and neutral, and address, needs or challenges, but not talking about it in a way that makes people feel like they're crap. Because if you read the DSM-4 or the DSM-5, the way we're described isn't very appealing. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in our intensity or focus. Autism spectrum disorder. Well, who grows up and says, oh, I just really want somebody to say that I'm something, dissatisfied, discouraged, disorder? Yeah. So they say that the things that it's very interesting because the traits that you find in the autistic community, regardless of if a person has minimal support needs, higher support needs, or if they fall somewhere in the middle, everything, many of the traits that we have exist in the general population, but they exist maybe in a frequency that's different, or at a level that is higher or lower than other people. So the things that we benefit us, we have fidget spinners, and every human being uses self-stimulatory behavior, not just autistic people or other neurodivergent people, but we might do it more, or we might do it in a way that's less typical or more obvious. And so all people have interests. If a person is non-autistic and they are really, really into sports, you call them an athlete. If they're really, really into music, you call them a musician, but we're obsessed. And that's not really right, because I think that if a person has something that really, really resonates with them, that's a gift, and there is a twice exceptional autistic activist and writer named Tascana Sasamatsu, who is actually the person who coined the term neurodivergent, who says that, when you think about autistic people, we're deep love. We go big or we go home. We're either all into it, real in, real on, or we're like way off, and so we don't do things in a mediocre way. And that includes our passions and our interests. Now, sometimes they're atypical, but they don't have to just be hobbies. I want to encourage you today, whoever you are, if you feel like, oh, I'm too old to be into this, or, oh, people of my gender aren't really into this, or, this is not a serious thing and I should really grow up and be more about this, or whatever, or no one's going to be friends with my kid because they're into this. You are who I'm talking to today. And I'm also kind of talking to myself today too, because sometimes this needs to be reminded that these passions that we have, this deep intensity that we have, is a gift. It's not a curse. And I'm going to use real life examples and real life people, many autistic, some have autistic traits and or are neurodivergent. And I'm going to talk about how you can channel that intense interest in a positive way. You can connect with people, socialize. The reason I'm in front of you is because, in a sense, for me, advocacy and, working, speaking out for the community, these are special interests. It's a passion of mine. So these things that people have, these intense interests, child or adult, can be something that can really help someone develop self-actualization and maybe even earn income. So don't, shove it off. Quickly, just a little bit about me. You all have received my bio, but that's the bio tells you certain things. So just to tell you, let's see, I was born in February. I like the number 7. Favorite color is black. I am an INFJ. I have a left-handed brother, left-handed husband, and left-handed son. Everyone in my family, all of my children have one or more disability. We're all neurodivergent. 3 of us are autistic. And I grew up, my parents are immigrants. I was assigned female at birth. I identify as a non-binary woman. I'm Black. My heritage is from West Africa. And I grew up not knowing I was autistic. I just knew I was weird. I mean, everybody knew I was weird. But I didn't know what it was. They didn't, it was never really identified as autism. Like many people, unfortunately, I was missed for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because of camouflaging and masking. Sometimes it's because people perceive things, autism needs to present a particular way. But really for me, it was my children's diagnoses and wanting to be a good mom to them and not wanting them to feel like the autism was this horrible thing and they were this horrible child that ruined my life. And, before I even, received my own diagnosis, I wanted to try to, like with anything else about my children, let them see the good, the bad, the ugly, and not just one side. And so in trying to learn more about, autism and disability acceptance and all of these things, I really learned a lot about myself and who I am, and I've really just been empowered to try to encourage people to make a change in your way, big or small. whether it's, writing to officials, whether it's talking to the school people at the school district, whether it's your best friend, sharing with them that it's not okay to use the R word. I'm just, a person, just like all of you, who just wants my children and if should they have children, their children, to live in a kinder, better world. So I'm going to use some terms quickly, whether you know them or not, I don't know, but I don't like to assume. So I'm going to use a few terms that are going to be kind of discussed in this presentation that you kind of need to give context to make sense. One is neurodiversity. You heard me say, talk about the concept of neurodivergence, and this might be familiar to many of you. Again, I don't make assumptions. So neurodiversity is a concept similar to that of biodiversity. We talk about basically the diversity of life that we have. And so Judy Singer, an autistic sociologist, is actually the person who coined that term in writing a thesis. And it's basically talking about neurological diversity. And it's talking about the reality, of our minds, of our brains. Just like no two individuals are alike, even identical twins are different from one another. Two people can be neurotypical, and yet you're still different from one another. You're not interchangeable. Your brains aren't the same. But there are some ways of thinking that kind of are more frequent, that are seen more frequent in the world. Just like approximately 90% of the population is right-handed, and the other 10% is ambidextrous or left-handed. There is a way of processing, communicating, thinking that is more typical or neurotypical, and people don't think that way, whether it's dyslexia, giftedness, intellectual disability, autism, ADHD, a range of different things. Then you fall into a neurominority category. And so those of us who believe in neurodiversity, the neurodiversity paradigm asserts that, okay, so our brains are different. And just like we're not all the same race or gender or age, we have different types of brains, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. And so I'm also going to be talking about the concept of inequity, about, privilege and power. And that's something that impacts all of us. I can sit here in front of you, and I definitely have some areas where I am marginalized, or where I have, where I'm, discriminated against, or have, challenges. But then I also have areas where I have an advantage that I just have, that I didn't ask for, or, that I, possess. And whether you have privilege, marginalization, and there's not a single person in this world who has all privilege or all marginalization. You're going to have a mix. It's variable. It changes. For example, in the United States of America, people my color are, might be a minority, but if I go to, where my parents are from in Africa, they are not, it is not. So, or I'm autistic, and that is a disability, but I have the capacity to speak, even though I am a person who is an augmentative assistive communication user at times. There are times that I am non-speaking, I do speak. And so that gives me privilege over my colleagues who are primarily non-speaking or minimally speaking, even though they might have something to say way better than what I have to say, but this is more comfortable for people. So it's just circumstances, in one setting, something that you have, that makes your life a little easier. And we have to understand that it's not that way for everyone else. And that's not to make us feel guilty. It's not to make us feel crap. It's just to let us recognize what is, and to be able to do something about it. And so I want to talk about identities as well, and the concept of intersectionality. So everyone has different identities. No one is just one thing. You are, type O blood type, and maybe you're independent, and maybe you're Northeastern, or maybe you're Russian, or maybe you're, whatever. Like the different things, different identities, from culture to race to language to national origin to religion, all of these different things. You have these different identities, and sometimes they intersect with one another. And if you have identities that are marginalized or oppressed, when they intersect, that concept from Kimberly Crenshaw, that can be challenging, kind of exponentially make things difficult. And so when you have all these things going on, then you might be considered strange. Now, you might be considered strange in a cool way, like Dr. Strange, but you're still strange. You're not like everyone else, right? You're different. And in this world, difference is seen as something that we should shy away from. Difference is seen as something that you want distance from. And so oftentimes, to survive or just to kind of make it through one's life, people put on a mask. They kind of play the role that's expected of them in society so that they won't be othered. But unfortunately, masking, camouflaging, that's not the real you. And that creates a barrier to connection. That creates a barrier to acceptance. It just, really, it's not living a real life. And what if it didn't have to be that way? Like, what if, I think about the fact that, I tell my kids, my babies, like how wonderful they are. And I mean it. And yes, I'm probably biased because I'm their mom, but they are wonderful. And I think that one thing that's really beautiful about this world is that we can look at things in so many different ways. When I think about the process of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, the waste products of one thing are the what creates the reactants for the other. So what's trash for one person is treasure for another. It's really about the perception. So plants are exhaling oxygen. They don't need that oxygen. They're like, but we're like breathing it in. We need it to survive. So really, if we could, it's a perception of things is really more, true and more key than what we think they are. And so I want to spend the next I'm going to spend some time doing some case studies with you all, and informal case studies, because I don't want it to be boring. They're going to be informal case studies in which I'm going to, oh my gosh, did I not say Judy Singer? Oh, sorry, I see it in the chat. Thank you all. Yes, some case studies about people who obsessions became opportunities for them. Because I know that there's someone in here who someone is like, oh, nobody wants to hear about that kind of whales, or nobody wants to hear about whatever type of vehicle that you're really into, or whatever. And everyone's special interests aren't the same. So I can say here that, for example, one of my children really, really, really likes Geometry Dash and wants to create games and and like all this kind of stuff, and wants me to watch it. I'm happy watching it, but also wants me to play it. I have no eye-hand coordination. I suck. So it can be a little challenging to, I'm glad that you're into this, but I can't like it in that way. I can like it and hear about it, but I don't have the same interest. But you don't have to dissuade for somebody from liking something. You can see its value, even if it's not your thing. And so I want to talk about a few people and how their obsessions led to opportunities. And so one person I'm going to talk about is Nick Walker. And so if you've ever been on the blog Neurocosmopolitan, Nick Walker and Dr. Nick Walker is a scholar. She grew up undiagnosed, found out about being autistic later in life, and grew up in a home that was, pretty abusive emotionally and physically, and grew up in a neighborhood where, you're a disabled person, you're different, so your peers ostracize you. And, and there were just a lot of circumstances where Nick was getting bullied a lot, getting beat up, getting, called names. And Nick at some point said, if I'm gonna be like beat up all the time, if I'm gonna always be in fights, I might as well at least learn how to fight, like maybe I can at least, defend myself. So Nick started taking, martial arts classes, and was amazed to find out, Aikido specifically, was amazed to learn that this was a place where using your body, like your body movements, were not wrong. Instead of people assuming that you knew how to move, or you knew how to sit, or the things were told to you clearly. You come in, you take your shoes off, you bow here, you move here, you practice here, you listen to your body. And so this was a way to use one's body, something that had always been something that everybody laughed at Nick about, laughed at her movements, laughed at her, but now using that same body, those same movements in such a graceful way in art. And Nick has been fascinated with martial arts ever since, and other types of, practices of this type, somatic practices and creative arts, and has done a lot of research in that area. Actually, in addition to owning a dojo, is a professor at a university and teaches about these things. And so this passion, or this interest, with this obsession with, I'm tired of getting beat up, became something that at a very young age, Nick became a black belt, and has trained so many people, has done, has a very inclusive philosophy when it comes to martial arts. And that's something that could benefit a lot of people. So this became a career, a passion, research, all started with a special interest. Then there's our good old friend, and I always mess up his name, Sir Anthony Hopkins. I hope that's correct. Says like, I know there's a singer like, and then there's sometimes I'm like, is it Hamilton? No, that's wrong. So, but you all know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Hannibal Lecter. I'm talking about, Amistad. I'm talking about so many different amazing roles. And this happened because he grew up being bullied by people. They bullied him a lot, and he would study them. And he was like, wow, I wonder what's up with such and such, that they want to be like this, or they want to treat somebody like this, or what do they get out of this? Like, he would really just try to get inside their head and try to understand why it was that they felt like they needed to bully him. And then he also learned, in studying and watching people, he learned how to mimic them very well. And so those skills, were amazing for him when he went into acting. There is a scene in Amistad, if you've seen that, there's a really, really poignant scene, a courtroom scene, and he did that in one take after having read it just for a few minutes. So that, the things that everybody complains about, echolalia, is repeating things all the time, or, mimicking or whatever, or, hanging on to small things. Those tiny little details are why he can play some of the types of characters that he can. He can bring to life people who, for many of us, would be hard to make them seem like a character that's interesting or likable, because of some of their characteristics. Our little friend Greta, a special interest, has changed the world. Fridays for Future came about because Greta was, when she was young, she was talking with her family about, their global, footprint. And her mother used to have a job where she used to have to kind of fly pretty frequently. And so Greta used to look at the amount of waste that they produced as a family and just get really depressed. And had learned about the environment, and didn't understand why everyone was still, why weren't people recycling? Why weren't people this? So they, as a family, wanted to change and be more, responsible and, for the planet. But that wasn't enough, because Greta was like, okay, so we're doing this, but what about the people across the street? What about the people there? What about the people there? And everybody would just tell her to leave it alone. Why would she care? Well, she cares because it's this, the world is not, going to survive if we keep treating it the way that we do. And so she felt like, I'm supposed to be worrying about geometry and all that when the world is getting destroyed. And so she started, striking on Fridays. And she was able to amplify the voices of so many other youth around the country and other places. And a lot of people in the global South have been experiencing a lot of things about climate change and have been advocating for it. And so she's been able to amplify those voices, so we've got a group of young, powerful people trying to educate all of us about how we need to take better care of our planet. And that all started with an obsession. What if Greta's parents had said, go to school, eat meat, stop this nonsense. This is so silly. But they didn't. Dr. Temple Grandin, who is one of the most well-known autistic people in the world. Parents were told, put her in an institution. She's hopeless. Fortunately, they had the privilege to be able to keep her at home. Some people weren't able at that time to do that, and they didn't really have much of a choice. But Temple was really, really interested in animals, and loved animals, and felt a kinship with them, and a lot of the and so that was something that basically she made inventions like the hug machine, for example, because of she understood sensory input and how it might calm the animals down because it calmed her down, and the way that they communicated, and so many things. She's done so much in the agricultural world, even though she's known mostly for autism. She's done a lot of things, and a non-traditional person in the agricultural world, being that she's female, and she's autistic, and an asexual, so a queer person. And if Temple's mom had said, stop acting ridiculous, you walking around with your hair cut like this and these ugly clothes and you smell like the barn, come on now, Temple, do something else with yourself. Then we wouldn't have, some of the innovations we have about humane slaughter, and we wouldn't have so many of the, things that we know about, in general about autism from Temple's voice. Marley Diaz, not autistic, but neurodivergent. And she is a young girl. Her family always loved giving back. From the time that she was young, her parents were immigrants. They always talked about the importance of, giving to, supporting charities and being involved in the community. And they always let the children pick different things that they wanted to do. So Marley loved reading, and noticed that a lot of the books that we grow up reading, Old Yeller, Where the Red Fern Grows, and this and the other, like there's all these really great books, but they usually have like male characters. There's not very many female leads. And occasionally you'll get a female lead, but there are very few female leads of color. And so she was, bothered by that. And she, hold on, I see that there's a hand up. Mike, I don't know how to like unmute you or whatever, or get you to talk. So, but I definitely want to address your question somehow. So I'm hoping Debbie can help me.
Maybe you can just put it in the chat, Mike. We'll talk about, and that goes for everybody. If you have a question, just put it in the chat and we'll talk about it.
And so Marley, she wanted, whoa, let me slow down. She started thinking about, so she decided that she wanted to give a lot of books to charity. Specifically, she wanted to get books to donate to an orphanage that was in Jamaica. And okay, so Mike, I think you might have typed your, how can I be entered? Oh, okay, so Cassandra and anyone else, the ebook drawing, if Debbie is going to put her email address in the chat. It was in there earlier, but we'll put it in again. And basically, we're going to just, randomly select some people to get some electronic copies of Sincerely Your Autistic Child. So D Page at Baltimore-Autism-Society.org. Thank you for asking that. And so Marley was like, okay, I want to send 1,000 books about Black girls to Jamaica. Because, Jamaica is a multi-racial society, that there are a number of people who are Black there. And she wanted the girls to see someone who looked like them. And so, Mike, I see your hand again. And I don't know if you have access to the chat, Mike, by any chance. But she wanted to collect books so that had, diverse characters. And so she reached out, her parents and her friends and her community, and, to find books that had diverse characters, and to encourage, authors to write such books, because there weren't, as many as there could have been. And so Marley has actually written a book herself. And so this obsession, her parents had been like, oh, what do you care? I mean, it's still a good story. Who cares what the people look like? Who cares what color, red, green, purple? Who cares what color the person is, as long as it's a really, a good story. Stop being ridiculous. Then there wouldn't have been this movement to encourage authors to diversify their characters, and there wouldn't have been people who could see themselves in these characters. It benefits all children to have books that have diverse, characters. It doesn't just have to be someone who's a person of color. It benefits us all to have that diversity. And then sometimes it's something that's a little bit more simple. There is a father and son, and the son, and I want to say the little boy's name is Sean, but because I can't remember, I'm going to just say father and son. And so this particular family, the little boy was autistic, and he, didn't really have a whole lot of spontaneous speech. He engaged in a lot of echolalia. And his parents were actually happy, because there was a time that he really didn't speak at all. And then he started, mimicking, and they excitedly told the providers, and they said, that's not communication. That's just autism. That's just echolalia. That's not real speech. That's not functional. They're just saying whatever. And that was devastating for the parents, but they're like, but he says this, he says that, he says that. Yeah, but he's just repeating. It's nothing. And they weren't so sure. They were like, you're saying it's nothing, but I don't know about that. It just doesn't seem senseless. Maybe we don't understand the purpose, but I think there's a purpose. But at any rate, their son loved to watch certain shows over and over again, or read certain books over and over again. And so he really, really, really liked The Incredibles. And so his dad would watch The Incredibles with him because, that's his son. He wants to bond with him and everything like that. And so his son would script the different parts of it. And so one day the dad started thinking, well, what, he can't communicate really with me per se, like the traditional way. But what if I, could script along with him, since I know that he's really into that. And so he tried it one day. And then from then on, it kind of became a routine between father and son. And I really hope I don't mess this up because I haven't done it for a while, but I loved watching the clip of the father and son. And so they would basically do a scene from Incredibles 2 with Frozone and his wife, Honey. So that's this picture. And so I'm going to try to do it myself. So maybe dad would be Frozone and son would be Honey, or whatever. They flip back and forth. Honey, yeah, where's my super suit? What? Where's my super suit? I put it away. Where? Why do you need to know? She's in another room. That's hence the yelling. I need it. Don't you run off doing no daring do. We've been planning this dinner for 2 months. The public is in danger. My evening is in danger. You tell me where my suit is, woman. I am your wife. I'm talking about the greater good. I am your wife. I am the greatest good you're ever going to get. And so they would do that script. And so it was just it was touching. And so the father learned, you know what, they're telling me there's no communication here. There's communication. I'm showing my son that I'm into what he's into. And so they started doing that with the Incredibles. They started doing it with other shows or books or things that his son was into. And you know what, that has led to some development of some spontaneous speech. His son still does engage in echolalia, but he's been able to develop some speech and has also been able to use other means to communicate, all because his parents didn't, pull him away from the thing that he was really interested in. And so the father-son bond between these two has become closer than ever. Armani Williams is an African-American, young teen, I believe, actually, I think he's no longer a teen, he might be 20 now, and the first openly autistic NASCAR driver. And again, he's a person of color, he's African-American. He is very interesting. His parents noticed when he was young that he loved lining up his cars, right? He would just line them up all over the house, line them up in different colors and shapes. And so they were like, maybe we could, since he doesn't like race with them or anything, let's show him some stuff on TV. He might be interested. So Dad showed him a couple of videos of racing and he really loved it. And so now, so he would really, really be into it. He'd watch him over and over and over again. And he begged his parents to take him to a race. And his parents were like, autistic child, loud race, big crowd. I don't know about all that. They were kind of worried, but Armani begged. And so they decided, okay, we're going to go. We're going to park. We're going to both go. I'm going to park the car somewhere far away. If one needs to take, escape, we're going to have our noise canceling headphones. We're going to have snacks. We're going to have, they had a plan because you got to, support your child. But they went. And fortunately, instead of being overwhelmed, maybe Armani is more of a sensory seeker. He loved it. He was all in. He was so engaged, and he always wanted to watch racing. He told his parents he wanted to be a race car driver, and they're like, "Well, you're gonna have to get good grades. You're gonna have to focus on this. You're gonna have to do this. You're gonna have to practice this." And so he did all of those things, and he raced, and he studied his craft. And he says that being autistic actually makes him a better race car driver because he hyper focuses. He's engaged. He's in tune with what's going on. He's not distracted by the things around him, and he's like really, really into like studying, his patterns and things like that. And so he's been able to be a powerful voice, for autism because of his parents not shutting him down and being like, oh, he's on the spectrum. It's kind of silly. We need to find something else that he can do. There's other people too. Paul Sirac is not necessarily known to be autistic, but has a lot of autistic traits. He was a world and national chess champion from the time that he was young. But I really want to talk more about the character on the left, the creator of Pokemon, who is autistic. He grew up so the area that he lived in when he was younger was kind of more rural. It started to gentrify, and become kind of more hip. And so there used to be like, fields and grass and this, and then people started building high rises and all this kind of stuff, and the land became a lot more expensive. He was kind of sad because as a kid he loved like collecting bugs and watching the little animals, and eventually as the area became more modern, those things weren't around. And so he started playing video games. He played video games a lot, to the point where his parents were like thinking about locking him up because he played so much. He wouldn't sleep. He'd stay up all night. They were like, this is getting ridiculous. He'd skip school sometimes to sneak home and play the video games. They were like, this is too much of an obsession. But he was not only interested in playing, he was also interested in developing the games, because he started thinking about how kids would play games. At the time that he was there was a game called Mortal Kombat. It was very popular. And he was like, wow, this game is so morbid and violent, and everything you play, the character dies, and oh, you died or you died. He was like, dang, we're talking about death for 4 and 5 year olds. It's kind of depressing. Do they really have to die? And so he decided, and what, I want kids to play with things that are fun, like when I was a kid, how I had all these different unique animals and bugs around me. And I don't think they should have to die. I think that concept is a little, morbid for children. Why can't they just pass out or faint or get tired and keep going? And so that's the concept that he came up with for Pokemon. And so he went to his parents, they were patient with him. There were times they were frustrated. He went to college, he was studying gaming, and sometimes he would be up late and he would miss class and he wouldn't go, and they got really frustrated. He actually didn't finish, but he was able to, again, he was able to not only develop friendships, but make a huge career for himself with his interest. And so those are people, but I just want to spend a little time talking more about kind of like the general concepts of taking it. So we're talking about those individual cases, but I want to talk about how it's kind of applied in a larger sense about how that can be. Like, I want to think about myself growing up. I was undiagnosed. My parents didn't know what it was, but they knew that certain tags in my clothes felt horrible, or I had to have my food a certain way and not touching on a plate, or I had to sit on a certain side of the car. And that stuff could have been annoying, but they indulged me because it allowed me to be with less anxiety and more comfortable. And really, is that big of a deal? Like, if it means something to me and it doesn't mean it's something to this other person, is it really, who cares? Like, why can't we just kind of like be a little bit, yield and do things a little bit more differently? I was able to come home, and my home was always a haven. The rest of the world was not. When I walked out the door of my house, everything, nobody's yes didn't mean yes and no didn't mean no, and nothing, you didn't understand. There's all these hidden rules, and you have to keep your body a certain way, or you have to answer a certain way, or you're wrong, or you're rude. But at home, they didn't understand me, had no idea why, but they let me be me. And so home was a place where I was accepted, I was loved. If I wanted to play that song over and over and over again, my mom said, cool, put on your headphones. I don't want to hear it. You can listen to it 50 times a day. That's fine, but not at, full blast. So we had to make some concessions, but they allowed me to do my thing. When I had my phase where I only wanted to wear black and no other color, black is what I wore. When I had my phase, when I decided I only was eating this thing, I think my mom probably snuck some hidden, vegetables or supplements in my food, but, they showed me love. There's bigger things to worry about than someone's obsessions. And we're starting, to see that the return on investment is something that a lot of employers are seeing. The neurodiversity initiatives that you see in a lot of employers, it's not just because they're super nice people who just like disabled people. I think some of them are, but they're also finding, wow, in terms of quality improvement, in terms of out of the box thinking, in terms of, all of these different things. They're seeing where having people, if you play to their strengths, where it can be so advantageous for your company. And then people are also seeing that in the in school settings, and we've all benefited from that. When we think about the pandemic, some of the things, the inclusive practices or the universal design that people have been asking for so many years, flexible work arrangements, telecommuting, having things explained a certain way, all of these different things that many people have wanted and everybody has been told is too much trouble, were the things that let the whole world keep running for, and is still running now, during a global pandemic. There's also other individuals. Benjamin Banneker, I'm only going to talk about him briefly because I do want to I was supposed to stop at midway and take questions, y'all. I'm so sorry, I just kept on going. But let me quickly wrap up. So Benjamin Banneker we don't know if he had an autism diagnosis or not, but he certainly had a lot of traits. So he was Black, and he lived at a time, he was, a free Black person, but most people were still enslaved. And so he loved, he was really into astronomy. He was really into math. He was really, he had a lot of traits. He was actually one of the people who helped to chart the boundaries of the original District of Columbia. He was hired to do this. That was an amazing, prestigious and, job for anyone, especially someone whose parents had been slaves. Yet he told his employers, look, if we're not done by a certain amount of time, because I've got to go chart this, and the other, with my telescope, then I'm just going to leave. And he meant it, and he left early because, again, that was important to him. And so he created an almanac at a time when most African Americans couldn't even read. And so he attracted the attention of Thomas Jefferson, who wrote to him. And he wrote back to Thomas Jefferson basically saying, you're a jerk. You always talk about freedom, and talking about the importance of freedom and, in France, but look at all my people that are enslaved right here, including the ones that you own. And you're a hypocrite. All the stuff that you're talking about, freedom and liberty, is crap. It's not universal for all people. Now that could have got him killed, but he was speaking his mind. And so, Thomas Jefferson, in his estate, that letter remains. He kept that letter. He didn't throw it away. That resonated with him. Someone who spoke his mind. And then I think about like myself. So I'm an educator. And I feel like part of what makes me a good educator is being autistic, because I'm so used to I don't make assumptions. I will be clear about the way things need to be. I let people turn things in different types of ways. I don't just make assumptions. I don't just see this and it's just this. I'm not afraid to say that I'm wrong or I'm sorry. And so I love to learn, and I love my classroom to be a comfortable environment. When I was in K through 12 as well, I had sensory things in my area. So I found that there's a lot of things that are beneficial for all learners, regardless of who they are. And I like what I like. There was a time when I used to pretend to move and sit and talk like everyone else because I wanted to hide. I wanted to blend in. But I want to be the real me. I want to be happy. So I like Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super. I like The Expanse. I like Steven Universe. I like all these things. I like Harry Potter. So if it's not cool or whatever, it's not mature. And, Iren, I can, yes, I could send, I'll give my email address before we end, or my assistant's rather, and I'll send that to you. Samantha, or if you have it, I don't know if you have it with you, Debbie, s.luna@advocacywithoutborders.org, but I'll make sure to get it to you
I'll send it out.
Okay. And so I lean into what I like. And so my very first keynote speech that I ever wrote was actually based on concepts from Steven Universe. And I've actually used things. I'm working on one now that's got some stuff from Guardians of the Galaxy, like all of these different things. I see so much in pop culture and in this and in that that is so important that to me, that's real. Here's some of the other stuff that I like. I love Marvel, love it, love it, love it. I love, I've just talked about, I love the Ober-Newton Chronicles. And it's not kid stuff to me. And so sometimes kids may it's interesting because sometimes children like things that people think are too adult. Like, why are you reading that? Or why are you into that? Or an adult think like something that's too childlike. Again, if it's our passion, if it makes us happy, is it really your place not to be accepting? Don't just tolerate okay, fine, I'll deal with it. I'll put up with it. Don't just tolerate it. Accept it. We need more than just tolerance. And so essentially, you think about a sidewalk. Would you really just shovel your side of the sidewalk and not shovel the whole sidewalk, for your spouse or your children or whatever? Or would you just shovel just the part you need? No, you would not. You know what I mean? You make the clearing big enough for the majority of us. There's no question that, it's important to do that. It's no question that you want to, make sure that everybody has a way. And so just because success isn't necessarily as linear as people think it is, just because it's kind of all convoluted, doesn't mean it's not success, And so in a moment, we're going to talk about the book, but I just wanted to remind you all that on a team or in a band or on a research, in a research group or in a hospital. There's never you don't have all these people just, who do the same exact thing. You have differentiation because it makes things richer and better. And that's, again, biodiversity, why we still have life today. The Dragon Ball characters, the Z Warriors, some of them have, Goku has a lot of strength, but he's kind of, isn't the most sharp, individual. Other people are better at strategy or better at teamwork or better at, patience. Together, they've saved the planet many times, both the ones with, extraordinary strength and the ones who were just, who have, average strength, but, a whole lot of intelligence or a whole lot of compassion. Together, they need one another. And so just to share with you all again, Sincerely Your Autistic Child is a book that I co-edited along with Sharon Davenport and Emily Page Ballou. It's 28 chapters, and then there's an introduction and conclusion. And basically it's autistic adults of different backgrounds and ages sharing what they want parents to know, what they wish their parents would have known, advice and tips and ideas. And a lot of the authors are, grew up assigned female at birth. So there's a lot of women and non-binary individuals. There's a few males, but it's kind of like looking at the kind of voices that aren't heard very much. There was an initial version of this book called What Every Autistic Girl Wishes Her Parents Knew. And so this is a more expansive version with, we've got people who are, great grandparents, and that's people in their early 20s. We've got people who are non-speaking, who have day-to-day support, who live in support with them, and we have people who speak. We have people who are parents, and we have people who are asexual, all kinds of autistic people, diagnosed as a child, diagnosed as an adult. But this is an important edited collection because what all of the contributors agreed that 50% of all the proceeds of the book, instead of going to the editors or to the authors, go to supporting autistic people. So go to initiatives to support autistic people, micro grants for autistic people in need, and transportation and scholarships and other humanitarian endeavors. And then the other half of the money is divided amongst the 28 participants and then the the 3 of us editors. So thank you, because when you purchase the book, you're supporting the community at large. So thank you for doing so. But I see James has typed, what would you have liked to have known prior to getting your diagnosis that would have helped better prepare you for what came after? That is such a good question, because let me tell you, I was so wet behind the ears. I was so naive. I just knew that now that I knew what it was, and I was going to tell people what it was, everything was going to be okay, right? Everybody was going to understand. I'm so naive. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I really truly thought, okay, it's just that people don't have an understanding of this or that. When you know what you need, or the way things need to be, or whatever. I didn't realize I was very, very naive to how much ableism is in this world. I'd always known about sexism, as a assigned female at birth. I knew what it was like about girls should be seen and not heard and all that junk. I remember always trying to be the fastest kid, not just the fastest girl, but the fastest kid. I, knew about how you might know the answer, but the teacher might call on a boy instead of you. I knew about gender, racial discrimination. I knew, people asking me if my relatives, rode on the back of zebras and stuff because they're from Africa. So I knew about those things, but I foolishly thought, oh, when it comes to disability, we've gotten way past that. It's the modern world. I would venture to say that we might be farther behind than we are with other forms of, of human rights. In terms of coming out, I actually kind of did. It's interesting because my children's diagnoses preceded my own, and I actually, was one of their providers one day, because I would argue back and forth. That's not autism. He does this because of this. She does this because of this. I know. I mean, I did that as a kid. Doesn't everybody do that? And they're like, no. And I was just kind of they were getting in the one day, one of them pulled me to the side and said, Morénike. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably stimming. Have you ever thought about being evaluated? And I was like, no. And she was like, but aren't your kids just like you now and the way you were as a kid? I was like, yeah. Aren't your kids autistic? I was like, you think I'm autistic? I was really confused. I was like, how is that possible? How can you be autistic and not know? I just really just didn't, it was so weird to me. But the more I read, reading not from the lens of a parent, but from, myself, the more I found myself And so I actually self-diagnosed prior to getting the formal diagnosis. I was on 2 waiting lists. I ended up getting evaluated by 2 people because I guess, I don't know, I guess I just wasn't sure. And there's no, it's funny because people talk about how they're giving autism diagnoses away. I'm like, no one's going to just risk their licensure and their career to just randomly give people diagnoses that don't apply. And no one's seeking a diagnosis for no reason. And so I did have a coming out, actually. There was a disability film festival in my town, and they were offering, if people were willing to participate, families, they wanted to kind of highlight disability. They were doing portraits and kind of like a gathering. And so I participated in that, and it was like a really big deal because I was always the person. I loved advocacy, but I was never one to put my face out there. It was more about just the cause, stay in the back. So, but I realized that, there's a lot of people who, could relate to, some of the things that I was sharing, and I wanted to just, to kind of be a voice. And so it was really powerful. I'm fortunate in that most of my family was okay. They were like, okay, we always knew you were something, we didn't know what it was. Like, but then I did get some of that, oh, that's not your portion in Jesus' name. Don't call yourself that, or that you're not that, or you don't have, you might have autism, autism does not have you. I'm thinking, do I have blackness? Blackness does not have me. I mean, like, do I have like Americanness? But Americanness does not have me, and so, and then you said, is there anything that has affected me differently? Being a person of color and being a parent and being autistic, I feel like all of these things, the intersectionality piece, like I think about the description that Kimberly Crenshaw gives of being at a 4-way intersection and a car is coming from here and from here and from here and from here. Like, I feel like there's things that I deal with that all autistic people deal with, but then there's things on top of that, like I remember when people would talk about, oh, we've got to have these, people have got to wear these, have these cards that say that they're autistic and they need to carry them around. And I'm thinking, have you lost your mind? Me being Black, I'm thinking, so you want somebody who already is flapping or looking, or, or nervous to reach for a card with a cup over there? Like, why? Like, or just, but then also there were certain things that sensory wise, I feel like there's certain things in my culture, for example, that some of that helped benefit, me, for example, the no eye contact thing. My parents were like, great, we don't have to teach her not to stare at folks, because in my culture, you don't look adults directly in the eye. You show reverence by looking down. You show respect. You show you're focusing and paying attention. So that was a good thing. The fact that I could read easily or play on my own, and then like sensory stuff, a lot of the food and the music and the movement kind of like was giving me automatic sensory input. So there are some good things, but then there were some bad things. There were ways that the black folks always told me that I wasn't Black. I had to learn how to speak, like, how to use AAVE. I was, because of the way I spoke, or I was weird, so it's like, you're not Black enough, you're not disabled enough. It can be hard, I think, I'm grateful for my cultures, but definitely it does complicate things. It is, it is heartbreaking to me. So let me tell you, with my daughter, that's how it was. Actually other people, the reason why she went to a Mother's Day Out program. I sent her to the one at our church because she didn't really know any other kids, and I thought she should socialize. She was, home with me. And so as soon as I, like within the first week, they were like, she doesn't know her name, she doesn't know this, she doesn't know that, like only telling me about all the things she didn't know or couldn't do or whatever. Nothing about the things that, her strengths. Nobody looked at any of that, only the negativity. She doesn't answer when we do this, she doesn't this, she doesn't that. And it was just, I remember, like I stopped and I observed her and the other kids at the same, like, and I, for the first time, looking at her, not just as my child and, but looking at her compared to other children. And it just was really frustrating. And then, it was, and especially when people would say stuff like, oh, well, we pray for that whatever spirit that's on her will change. It is very frustrating. I can tell you, there's a bunch of curse words have run through my mind many a time in dealing with people and their ignorance. But what I've tried to do is just, try to, in some ways, I've called it the litmus test of who's real, because there's certain people that I've had to just kind of cut out of my life or reduce my time. Because if you are going to make me feel bad about my child, or if you're not going to accept my child, then I don't need you and your negative energy, But sometimes some people come around, like some people, if you educate them gently, you kind of correct them gently or explain things or give them examples, sometimes that helps. It's a process. It really is. And some people are farther along than others, but when you find those people who do support and encourage you, latch on to them because it's really important. And also, I think people need to understand that no child development is so different in autism. Like I think about the things my daughter did not speak for the most part. She was echolalic and they thought she had intellectual disability. She's actually, gifted. She qualifies for Mensa, but because she didn't babble, she didn't do this, she didn't do that, she didn't point, she looked very severely autistic, and she was, but that, whether a person's cognition is intact, you can have, however your, autism presents, you may or may not, you may have, advanced cognition, average, or you might have struggles, you're still a person, but people need to not equate those things with, socialization or speaking or whatever with intelligence. They are totally separate from that. And, and so she has surprised my daughter's she's in a college class right now, actually 2 college classes. I mean, she's surprised a lot of people. And she's still very much autistic, but like, our growth is different. There are certain things I'm just starting to understand in adulthood that maybe other people understood years ago that I never got, like little jokes or whatever. Sometimes the development is not always the same. It may take some time for her to catch up, but like you mentioned, she was born early, so she's already a fighter. She's a fighter. She's a strong little one. And so you just keep on trucking and don't let anybody, get you down. It's easier said than done, but you remember that child is here for a reason. But I would say that one thing I do is kind of be straight with her, because I think that there's a character who mentioned she's not a character, she's a person, but she's a contributor. Haley Moss writes a chapter in our book about how her parents explained autism to her using the examples of Harry Potter, like, okay, there's like the wizards and the muggles. And so they only emphasized the good. And they did that on purpose because they felt like there was so much negativity that everybody was focused on that they wanted her to see the good. The problem was, it kind of reminds me of like how when I was a kid growing up, the thing to do was to be colorblind. I don't see color. And that's how all of us, I'm an ex-centennial. That's what now we know better. People know better about, we can see color. Just don't have to hate it. But when I was growing up, it was supposed to be, you don't see it because you just see a person. But that means you're erasing a large part of who they are. And so, but that was just the way that we thought. So when I know that, I remember when I was experiencing racism, I was shocked because I had been in this protective little bubble with all these nice teachers and nice friends and, like people who loved everybody. And that's what I thought the world was like. And it was not. And so it's not that you want to expose your child to negativity, but you want to let them just have a preparation, let them know that some people don't understand or misinterpret things or think this way or view things a particular way. But you also want to affirm who she is. You want to, if you can, if there's ways you can role play certain things with her, so that, possibilities. If there's things, there's an author, I'm going to put my website in the chat only because I cannot remember for the life of me. It's a book club. It's a book club called That Autism Book Club. And it is run by Megan Ashburn. And so if you on my website, I'm putting morenikego.com/resources. If you go on the resources page and scroll way down, I've got a list of autism and neurodiversity resources. And about halfway down it says something like 100 plus neurodiversity books or whatever. There's like a huge list for just children about autism and neurodiversity. And there's a huge list that has stuff, for adults, English, Spanish. I would encourage that, get some positive things for your child to see about people who are different as well. Lift her up, encourage her, and give her some space. When she starts school, like I always felt like school was like a job, and not like how, I don't mean like, you're there for 7 hours. I mean, when you're autistic, everything is so much work. Just, the simple things like, an interaction with somebody, when do you say hi? When do you look down? And when, all the things that people just instinctively do that we have to actually do manually, that we have to think about, are so much work, so much. I would be drained. I would come home drained, and I would sometimes act out, not because my family did anything to me, but just the weight of being at school all day. It was like, weighing these crushing boulders all day, and then having to, and just kind of come home and just be me. And sometimes, so give her, so if there's things that she's really into, like, if my parents had said, you can't read till this time of night, or you can't watch TV, I think I would have lost it. I needed that release. So I think those are some things, like let her have some downtime, let her have some things that she's in, she can get into, to kind of unwind from her day, and encourage her to speak and to you, and to be, to communicate. I saw there's a question about autism in adolescence. That was one of the most difficult periods of my life. I kept a suicide journal. I think adolescence is hard for everybody. It's especially hard if you don't understand the way the world works. And if everything seems to be fake and everything seems to be such lies. And it was a very hard period. What helped me was finding people who liked me for me, and unfortunately, I still found a lot of, I just encourage parents to just really watch your children, because your children can seem fine and they're not fine. We aren't going to necessarily display things the same way that some other person will if we're depressed or if we're struggling, so it's just, it's difficult. It's, but, I guess just really try to just be watchful and encourage them to talk. In terms of socializing can be hard. So I would say if there's something that your son likes, if he likes, certain kind of sports or music or whatever, I try to allow him to do whatever that thing is, and see if there are some activities that he can do with other people in related to that, because you're more likely to socialize more comfortably when you like what you're doing. So if socialization itself is already, like I like people I like who are really nice, who I enjoy spending time with, I dread calling them or going to an event that they invited me to or whatever. Like I hate, and these are people I like, much less people I don't like. So it's just hard in and of itself. So if there's things that he's into, that makes it easier. And then sometimes maybe some people may need one person to hang out with. It's better than a whole group, or someone younger, or online communication, or things of that nature. So I would say there are some things. I would say that the socialization can look a little bit different. He may need it differently. Definitely think socialization is good, but if you can find like non-traditional, like one thing I didn't do was, I knew my kids couldn't handle stuff like a full day of day camp or full day of this, or even now they're in small schools, because some things are just too overwhelming. So I guess kind of taking the cue from your child, and doing things in small doses, and experimenting, I think can help. Ofe, in terms of ABA, so there's a lot of different opinions that people have about ABA. I will say that my opinion is that anything that doesn't take into account internal factors is always going to be lacking, because autism is not behavioral. We can see certain things, but a behaviorist approach is never going to get at the core of what autism is, in terms of, you see this, you do this. Something can be effective. Like when I grew up in the 80s, you spank kids for everything, right? And now we know that you don't need to do all that, but that worked. Kids would sit still and mind and be quiet or whatever, but it was because they were scared into, or if you think about economics, slavery worked. It was an efficient system, but it was an unethical system. So I think things can have an impact, things can work, but is it truly? So what I would say is everybody lives in a different area. I don't like the one size fits all approach that a lot of people have. Oh, if your kid has autism, you need to put them in 40 hours of this, and you need to have gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free. You need to do this. I'm thinking, no, everybody's different. What works for child A may not be what child B needs. Is there, some people have more eclectic or natural behavioral focused type of, programs that implement ABA practices. I think that, practitioners, I don't want to judge an entire field by, some bad actors, but I would say that I regret having my daughter in ABA. My son was not in it. My daughter learned very well how to pass, but the anxiety that she still carries today, I just feel like it wasn't something for the whole person that she is. It wasn't like a developmentally appropriate approach for her. Are there skills that, if a person's really, really self-injuring, you know what I mean? And if there's certain things that, certain skills or that, might be more easily or quickly learned in ABA in terms of safety or what have you. Again, I'm not judging people, but I would just encourage people to look at your child as a whole. Speech therapy could be helpful. Technology can be helpful. Occupational therapy. play therapy, and then just being a kid too, and time and love, so if I could go back, I would not have my daughter in ABA all those hours, even though I was impressed by what she was able to do in just this short amount of time. They probably trained her this, but I just think about, what was happening on the inside that I couldn't see, but I was seeing all this compliance, you know what I mean? Like, but again, I know that all children are different, all adults are different, all families are different. Definitely whatever a person is doing in any part of their life, you want to try to, is it something that, takes into consideration who they are as a person? Like, is someone trying to stop them from stimming? Why? I mean, is their stim something like where they're hitting themselves in the eye? Then yeah, you want to stop that stim, you want to replace it. But if it's just because it's weird, do you really want to stop them? Punishment? Does it really feel natural to ignore your child until they use a word? Like, you want them to say more, and because they didn't say more, and they say or whatever they mean more, you ignore them and you look to the side or you pretend like they're not there. It just seems so uncool, so cruel to me. There's a lot of stuff that we understand that we don't show. I'm so grateful that we didn't talk about my daughter like she was a piece of furniture, because I learned later that she understood it. Her receptive, comprehension was so advanced. There's things that she's, later when she was able to speak, I'm like, oh my gosh, she knew this, she saw that, she was watching this, she was reading this, she was doing this. And I'm just imagining when people are like, oh, my life is ruined. I can't even go to Starbucks. Or why can't he be normal? He can't even play with his brother. I hate autism. I mean, I love you, Johnny, but I hate your autism. You just want to kill yourself. So and people, I'm so sorry. I realize thank you, everyone. Just thank you for those of you who are here. I just want to thank you on behalf of my community. I know we can give y'all a hard time sometimes, parents. I know we do. I know we do. And sometimes y'all deserve it. But I'm saying it's really from a place of love. If we thought you all were a lost cause and hopeless, we wouldn't bother. We just are so passionate. Like, I don't want any child. It is my goal that my children do not live the life that I lived. That some of the things that I've been through in terms of, assault, abuse, harassment, the naivete that I had, and being manipulated, I wouldn't wish them on my worst of enemies. I certainly wouldn't wish it on my child. This world can be a dangerous place for us. And so, so sometimes we just really want to just, like drive the point home. And we don't always say it the most tactful or respectful way, So yeah, if we're coming at you and say, oh my gosh, why are you puzzle pieces everywhere? Why are you using first person, first language? You're an abuser, try to not look at the delivery of the message, but look at the heart of where we're coming from. And everything's not going to be applicable to every situation, but I think a lot of things are. There's a lot of people who, I think some of my colleagues that are, are mentally speaking, some of the brilliant things that they have to say and share that someone wouldn't expect from the lives that they live. You just can't judge a book by its cover. And just like me, I may look totally fine. I'm a professor, I've got a kid, but I self-injure and I get lost and I have a whole lot of things that need work. I'm a work in progress like everyone else. So, don't give up on your babies. I live a happy life because I'm me, I'm my real self. I've got a husband who explains things to me when I don't understand. He's like the neurotypical translator. I've got kids and he does the social stuff that I can't do. I've got kids that I love and they love me. There are things that are definitely very hard about life, but I wouldn't give it up. I'm grateful I wouldn't want to be anybody but who I am. Just my real self, and I want your children and yours to be who they are. And I just thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. And I know that as parents, hearing your perspective and hearing stories of autistics helps us to make better decisions, I think, and helps us to see the whole picture.
Yes, because you won't get gaslit. And I know, remember, I started with my parent hat on. Parents, it's not an easy role. everybody wants to scream at you. So everybody's looking down at you. You didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. Why can't your kid can't do this? Why can't everybody's judging you? You're trying to be there for your child. You're trying to understand this. The professionals are telling you you're dumb and you don't know anything because you don't have this degree and they do, or you haven't worked in this field for this time, or you're just too close to the situation. And then other people are telling you, well, I'm on the spectrum, you're not. So what do you know? So I mean, everywhere you turn, it's like you don't know enough. When you love this kid, I will tell you this. No, you don't understand the way their brain works, but that's your baby. You have lived, so there's lived experience, lived expertise and learned expertise. You have the lived expertise of a mom, of being in the house with that child. You know that particular child. You may not understand why they flap, but you know that it makes them happy. Or you know they like this thing, you have no idea why. Or when they do this, it means this. You may not understand the rationale behind it, but you know your kid, their name, their interests. We don't know those things. We do know what it's like to be autistic. So if we kind of put our knowledge together, your intimate knowledge of your child and ours of, okay, what this might mean, what this might, what this does do, what this doesn't do, how this feels. If we put our knowledge together, it can be so much better, because we don't know your kid. We don't know your kid. We know what it's like to be an autistic kid, but we don't know what it's like to be your kid. You don't either, but at least you know how to parent your kid. But we know what it's like to be a kid. So we can help one another. I'm an adoptive parent, and I learned so much from the voices of adoptees. I've been an adoptive parent before I was a biological parent, but I would never say that I'm the voice of adoptees. I'm never going to have that exact same experience. Learning from people who lived that, it makes me a better mom to my children. And I don't always like what they have to say. Sometimes people say certain things and it kind of hurts my feelings, but then I have to sit and think about it. And you know what? I'd rather know and not make that mistake with my kid, or if I'm making it, change, than not know. I want to be the best parent I can be, and I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm going to try. And so you keep trying to, you just keep learning, you keep growing. Screw the world and what they like or what they don't like. Your child wants to wear a pink, whatever, that's not their business.
I had a friend, and she'd say, "Who gives a hamburger if if I like to look at lights, or I flap my hand?" She's like, "Who gives?" And she said that neurotypicals are brought up, be yourself. They're told,
but we're told to be someone else.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
But thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Make
being
sure
who you are. The chat.
Yes.
There's some nice comments in there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Watch for the recording.
Have a great evening, everyone.